Hi there. So today I wanted to talk to you about an awesome story from the Bible that I've always loved. It's one of my favorite stories of Jesus, and it's one of the stories that made me fall in love with him. And it is the story of how Jesus handled the woman who was caught in adultery. It occurs in John chapter 8, right at the beginning of the chapter. And basically, what happens is Jesus is doing his ministry on earth, preaching the whole love your neighbor, love your enemies, forgive everybody, non-violence, turn the other cheek, which, we're kind of used to nowadays, 2,000 years later. But back in the day, that was ridiculously revolutionary. I mean, it was like, love your enemies, turn the other cheek. Who in their right mind would do that? It was really crazy teaching. And the teachings in the Old Testament taught that if a woman was caught in the act of adultery, she needed to be put to death. And the way that they would put her to death would be to throw stones at her until she was dead. They actually still do this in many places in the Middle East today. If a woman is caught in adultery, or sometimes even just looking at a man, they will chuck stones at her until she's dead. And so the Pharisees, which are essentially, the religious leaders of the day, wanted to make Jesus look like a hypocrite. And so what they did was they went and they found this girl who had been caught in the act of adultery. And we don't really know, was she a prostitute or what the story was exactly, but she had been caught in the act of adultery, and they brought her out to Jesus. And and basically said, "Hey, look what we found. What should you do now, huh?" And then Jesus famously said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." And of course, everybody on the earth has sinned at some point in time. I mean, even if it was just a small sin, I mean, everybody at some point in time has had a dirty thought, or maybe lied about something, or something like that. And so it kind of caught the Pharisees off guard, and they all dropped their stones and walked away. I really enjoyed the Bible. The Bible's the epic miniseries rendition of this story, because they added that the girl might have had a child. And so back in those days, I imagine a scenario where perhaps there was a woman who was married to a man, and then, maybe the Roman authorities killed the man, because life was pretty brutal back then. And, when you called the police might kill you, So, the Roman authorities showed up and they killed her husband. And since she was a woman, she was not allowed to inherit any land, but she still had a child to take care of. And so what else are you supposed to do? I mean, so she became a prostitute. She had no other real choice, And so, and I always thought that was really deep, because, that basically means not only was she sacrificing her life for her son, but she was also sacrificing her soul, because according to her beliefs, she would be going to hell for that. So sacrificing her soul to take care of her son, and in the meantime having to deal with the grief of having just lost a husband. And so, in my opinion, Jesus, who is basically the ultimate empath, used his empathy, his ability to put himself in another person's shoes, and literally felt what she was going through, and forgave her and had mercy on her, because Jesus is awesome, and he's just that kind of guy. So anyway, I'm going to read the Bible verse here. It's John chapter 8, starting at verse 3. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman who had been committing adultery, and they made her stand before them all. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of committing adultery. And the law of Moses commands that such a woman should be stoned to death. What do you say?" They said this to trap Jesus, so that they could accuse him. But he bent over and began writing in the sand. As they stood there asking him questions, he straightened up and said to them, "Whomever one of you has committed no sin may be the first one to throw a stone at her." Then he bent over again and began to write in the sand again. When they heard this, they all left, one by one, the older ones first. Jesus was left alone with the woman still standing there. He straightened up and said to her, "Where are your accusers, ma'am? Have they left you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Well, then," Jesus said, "I don't accuse you either. Go now and sin no more. So that's the official Bible verse in John chapter 8. And I love how Jesus just completely turns it on its end, and has mercy on the woman. He doesn't say that that it's okay what she was doing. I mean, he admits, she needed to turn around and stop sinning. But I love how he says, I don't accuse you either. He says, I don't accuse you before he says, go and don't sin again. And this brings me to another point in John chapter 12, verse 47, where he says, whoever receives my words but does not follow them, I do not judge them, because I came not to judge the world, but to save the world. And this is really a statement on the upside down kingdom of Jesus' rule. Basically, that he gives us the grace and the forgiveness so that we can have grace and forgiveness ourselves. And through that grace and forgiveness, it gives us the strength to rise above our own weaknesses and to become something better than we are. Another interesting thing about that verse that I just read in John 8 is when Jesus bent down and started writing things in the sand. I always wondered, what is he writing in the sand there? I mean, was he like writing down all the names of all the different Pharisees that had been to visit this prostitute? Is that what it was, or was he like writing down all the different sins, that each one of them had done, or maybe he was just writing their names or something like that. And I also think it's interesting in John chapter 8, verse 9, when they heard this, they all left one by one, the older ones first. Now, why did the older ones leave first? Was it because the older ones, having been alive longer, had had more sin and had had more temptation? Anyway, I've always loved this verse from the Bible, so I just wanted to share my thoughts on it with you. And thank you very much for taking the time to listen and watch. Have a great day.